Today's noon meditation is entitled The Yoga of Devotion. And I don't know about you, but it's been a tough week. A difficult, challenging week in a number of ways. And if you're like me, it may be an interesting sort of challenge to be thinking about devotion today. But I think from a mystical or spiritual perspective, this is exactly the time that we would want to be, not just thinking about, contemplating, but actually practicing devotion. But I want to be clear right from the outset that devotion doesn't always look the way we might think it looks at first glance. For example, if you had a child that was moving towards an empty light socket, you would probably strongly admonish that child and say, "No," in a very firm, strong voice. Or if your child or your grandchild or your niece or nephew is going to hit someone, you would probably admonish them and tell them no in a very strong voice. It doesn't mean that we don't love the child or that we care for them less. It perhaps means that we care even more. And not just for the child, but for the child's environment and perhaps for ourselves. So, just to challenge our idea of devotion, and this comes up too when we think about compassion, it's not meant to suggest some sort of passivity. Devotion is a very active practice, and it's something that we cultivate, and that hopefully as we spend some time reflecting on this and meditating on it today, we can see how we can actually, the devotion doesn't just happen, love doesn't just happen, that we actually work to build it, to grow it, to cultivate it. You probably know that yoga is a Sanskrit term that means to yoke or union. But the question might rise, to yoke what? Or union with what? And this is where I think devotion may come in, and we can get a glimpse into what we're actually yoking to and what we're moving towards union with when we think of devotion. And in Sanskrit, devotion is bhakti. And so you probably heard this term Bhakti Yoga. And it means the yoga of devotion or the yoga of love. And Kriya Yoga is not strictly a bhakti path, but almost all yogic paths have elements of all the other yogic paths in them. And so while Kriya Yoga isn't strictly a bhakti path, we do have devotion and love as a very, very significant part of our practice. Just to think a little bit more about this idea of Bhakti Yoga, think of it as a spiritual practice that's really focused on, yes, cultivating love, devotion towards God, our idea of God, our concept of God. But it's a practice that's not concerned about some fruit of the action. It's not hoping to stave off some awful afterlife if we don't love God. And it's also not trying to get something in particular during this life. It's really, we often talk in terms of attachment and detachment. It's a love that's not attached to any outcome. It's not a possessive love. It's a free and open-hearted love that we're trying to cultivate. In the course of our daily lives, we can often feel sort of cut off and disconnected. We can have a sense of aloneness and become very focused on I and me and mine. And from a mystical perspective, this is just the opposite of what reality is. Reality isn't our disconnection. Reality is our universal connection, the sense of being one with all things and all beings. So part of, as we talk about and think about this idea of Bhakti Yoga, think about how we can practice letting go of this ego identity focus on I, me, and mine, and stretch and open to a greater connection with our world and with our notion of God. One way that we can see this practiced, and we see this Bhakti Yoga manifested, is in relationship to our teacher. And this can look a little odd, especially to people outside that relationship. But think of the way that the relationship with the teacher develops. First, what does the teacher do? The teacher reminds us of who we are, what our true nature is, who we are at our core. And the teacher is there to show us when we lose our way, how to sort of reclaim the path, recenter ourselves and find our way back. But if you've noticed or observed, especially in many of the Eastern traditions, this extreme deference that one might show to their teacher, it can feel a little off-putting. But I want to talk about this a little bit. That deference, an analogy might be that the student is at the bottom of a mountain and the teacher is at the top of the mountain. And so there is this deference, but also this difference that's recognized. And it's not that the teacher is superior or better, but as Kriyananda would say, the teacher has started a little bit earlier. And so they've gotten someplace that the student aspires to experience, to arrive at. And so what we can witness, or what we view sometimes, is this sense of the student putting the teacher on a very high pedestal. And I want to suggest to you today that that's really a developmental experience, that it's not fixed, it's fluid. And what happens early on in a teacher-student relationship is that the student sees in their teacher a part of themselves, but it feels like it's very far away or very high up. And so there's this sense of tremendous deference, a bowing to, a standing up for. But if one is lucky enough to spend a long enough period of time with a teacher while doing one's practices, and as those practices deepen and as one's awarenesses and realizations mount, there becomes a shift in that relationship between teacher and student, and it becomes more like a friendship, a camaraderie. Because now that teacher and that student are, because of the student's practices, are now sharing the same world. It's an interesting thing to consider, that if in the Buddhist tradition, it's talked about as most of us are sleeping, right? We're not awake. And what we're trying to do is wake up. And if you're lucky enough to have a teacher who has awakened, then it's like two people coming together that are in different worlds. There's the world that the teacher occupies that's awakened, and there's the world that the student's in, which is a little bit sleepy. And as the student's practices deepen, and as that student practices their meditation and other observances, they begin to awaken, and they can share in those experiences then. And this, what looked like tremendous deference and difference from an outside perspective, and perhaps even from the student's perspective, it becomes closer, and there can be this great sense of camaraderie that develops. Now, in our culture, some have argued that we can get stuck in that deferential place, that we are, we can be, almost as a product of our culture, particularly wounded and sort of stunted in terms of our sense of ourselves. And so we look for somebody that we can elevate, somebody that is greater than ourselves and who has experiences that we could never hope or imagine having. And that's a little bit dangerous, because after all, the teacher is not there to keep the student in that place. The teacher is there to share and show that whatever he or she has attained, the student can attain as well. And that's the wonderful thing that I find, at least one of the wonderful things about the yogic path, and in particular Kriya Yoga. There's not a sense of it's just for Yogananda or just for Shelley or just for Kriyananda. The experiences that are experienced by these masters are meant for each of us. It's our birthright. It's what we're destined for, whether we realize it in this lifetime or not. But we can get locked in to this sense of, I could never be that. I could never have that experience. I could never know or realize what Kriyananda has realized, or what Shelley Ji has realized, or what Yogananda realized. And that is something we really need to examine in ourselves. So this idea of deference is appropriate and useful, and it's meaningful, especially if we can think of it as a developmental sort of path that one comes to initially, that teacher, and really elevates that person, because in some sense that is a representing one's relationship to one's higher self, one's own higher self, one's guru within. And I think, and this is another piece of the teachings of Kriya Yoga, it may very well be that in the same way that relationship develops from very, very deferential and a sense of extreme difference between the teacher and the student, that in the same way, our relationship to God also transforms. In Kriya Yoga, we don't talk about God as creator. It's God, the dreamer. And we have entered the cosmic dream of God. And we are brothers, sisters to God. But it sure doesn't begin that way, that experience. I think the the difference between ourselves and God is so extreme that we spend much of our relationship, certainly, with a sense of God being elevated. And again, that's appropriate and very meaningful in the way that we're talking today about Bhakti Yoga, this idea of devotion. So we can witness this devotional love in the teacher-student relationship, but we also have this concept of the Ishta Devata in Kriya Yoga, the idea of our chosen face of God. And from this perspective, the Ishta Devata is one who we aspire to embody the qualities, the characteristics of our chosen face of God, whether that's Krishna or Christ or Buddha or Kali, Avalokiteshvara. The choices that we have are practically infinite. The choices of our chosen face of God. And what we talk about in Kriya Yoga is we want to choose a face of God that we particularly resonate with, or that we see characteristics or qualities of this particular manifestation of God that we would like to cultivate within ourselves, that we would like to embody. And so we choose this Ishta Devata carefully, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously, sometimes it comes to us in our dreams or in our deep meditation. Sometimes it's a more deliberate, conscious, volitional choice of our chosen face of God. But when we find our Ishta Devata, when we make that commitment, it can become this incredible devotional relationship. Again, where there's a sense of difference initially, but over time, that difference can sort of dissolve away, and one can feel quite a sense of connection, camaraderie, even companionship with one's Ishta Devata, one's chosen face of God. I thought we could do a little work with this, have a little meditation. And before we begin, I just want you to float back, and maybe you're going to float back a few weeks, maybe you'll float back a few months, maybe you'll float back a few years, maybe you'll have to float back a decade or so. But I want you to think about the last time that you can recall feeling in love. Feeling in love. Let's go ahead and make any adjustments you need to make to assume a good meditative posture. And you may need to adjust your shoulders, or perhaps tuck the chin or lift the chin so that the ears and the shoulders are in line. And also check out the hips and see that the ears and the shoulders and the hips are all in a line. And as you quiet the body and allow yourself, for example, let's just attend to the breath for a few moments. Just noticing the breath flowing in or flowing out. Allow yourself now to float back to that time that you can recall feeling in love. See if you can bring it not just to your mind, but to every cell of your being, what it felt like to be in love. How did it feel? How did you relate to the world? Often when we're in love, we can feel this openness, this open-heartedness that radiates out, and it's as if we love the entire world. It can even feel as if we're not loving as an action, but that we're actually being love, that we are love. It's not something we're doing, it's something we are. Just notice as you recall a time that you were in love. Notice what feelings are arising now, and perhaps what memories, what recollections are occurring to you. See if you can allow it to saturate and surround each and every cell of your being and each and every petal of your mind, that feeling of being in love. Even to the point of feeling that you are love. And you might just bring your awareness, your attention back to the breath, just noticing the breath flowing in, flowing out. And if you'd like, you could wiggle your toes, wiggle your fingers, move your head from side to side. Shanti. Feeling in love is very, very powerful. And there are all these things that often go along with it. We want to possess the other, is a very common experience. And sometimes that appears in dreams as wanting to consume the other person, wanting to take them all fully. The love that we want to talk about and that we're thinking about today is non-possessive. It doesn't suggest ownership or Now, that doesn't mean that we don't feel jealous, for example, sometimes in that student-teacher relationship. But it becomes something to work with, right? The awareness of jealousy, the sense of not being able to have enough time with the teacher, or that somebody else is getting more attention or more time. That becomes something to truly work with in the Bhakti Yoga practice. Not to berate ourselves for having the human feelings of jealousy or feeling some sense of insecurity or something about that relationship, but much more the awareness that we can be open-hearted and fully loving without being possessive and without needing to own. In this same way that we can feel in love, that we've, hopefully each of us have had that experience. Maybe it was with a pet, a companion animal, a dog or a cat, that we felt this sense of love, of devotion for. Hopefully we have each had that experience, and to bring that then to our relationship to our chosen face of God, to our Ishta Devata, to feel it in its totality, every cell of our being, every petal of our mind, to have that sense of love for our Ishta Devata. This, I think, is at the heart of the Bhakti Yoga practice. Again, not with the idea of being possessive about that chosen face of God. Like, I have a special relationship with Krishna, or nobody relates to Buddha in the way that I do. It's not that kind of relationship. It's a non-possessive, open-hearted love of our chosen form of God. A way to think about this, again, from the Kriya Yoga perspective, is that, as you know, we're always trying to lift our energies, lift the energies up the spine, ultimately to the sun center and even beyond to the 1,000-petal lotus, and beyond that to the Karuna Rupas. We're always trying to lift our energy, but just the nature of our existence, most of us are operating from what we call in Kriya Yoga the Marjan chakra. And the Marjan chakra is very much about I, me, and mine. It's very much about self-focus. It's not all bad. Don't get me wrong. There's energy there that we want to harness and that we need to be able to use on our spiritual path. But one of the things and one of the great challenges in our lives, and spiritual traditions around the planet have talked about this, is to move from selfishness to selflessness, from selfishness to unselfish love, from possessive love to unselfish, unconditional, uninhibited love that's here at the heart, what we call the Venus chakra. And so what we're trying to do is something that we can practice on a day in and day out basis. If you're lucky enough to have someone, or perhaps a companion animal, someone in your life that you can show unselfish love, and that you do show unselfish love to, just feel that, notice that, experience it. Don't take it as something that's just routine, but truly, truly pay attention to it. When you do an unselfish act, an act where, and again, this is how we know it's unselfish. We're not expecting anything in return. And so it's an act where we say, I love you, and you don't need to say you love me back. I want to give this to you, and I don't expect anything in return. And I'm not going to harness some resentment if you don't, on some future occasion, show me the same favor. It's unselfish in that it doesn't have any expectation of outcome. It's this idea of being love, not doing love, but actually being love. And I think we probably have occasions where we're doing this day in and day out, and we can pay attention to it, we can notice it, and we can really feel it when it's happening. In relation to our Ishta Devata, we can think of what this unselfish love might look like, manifested. Perhaps it's giving to others in this way that we're talking about, or that I'm suggesting we might do on a daily basis with our loved ones. Giving to others while seeing our Ishta Devata in them. After all, this namaste is acknowledging the divinity within each of you. It's acknowledging that my Ishta Devata resides in each of you. And so our relationship with our Ishta Devata doesn't have to be something that's on a pedestal or something that's so distant or different from ourselves or from where we're at this moment. We can bring it very much into our life each and every moment of each and every interaction. And sometimes not even when it's a physical interaction. We can hold somebody in our mind and we can send that unconditional love, that love that doesn't expect anything in return. As I was saying at the outset today, this love isn't naive, right? And it's not without also practicing wisdom. So the love that we express that is unconditional and that doesn't expect anything in return, again, it's not a passive love. It's not laying down and saying to the person that we care about, have your way. Sometimes the very thing that is an expression of love is the harder thing. It's setting a boundary, setting a limit. It's saying no. If we're in relationship with someone, for example, who has some sort of addictive behavior, the loving thing to do in that relationship may be the very hard thing of saying no, of not supporting it, of not colluding with it, of not enabling it. And for many people, that becomes very hard because it doesn't seem loving. In the moment, it doesn't seem like an act of love. But in the long run, it is absolutely the loving thing to do, to say no. No, I won't support the choices that you're making because they're destructive choices. They're harmful choices. So being loving is not being a fool. And practicing Bhakti Yoga is also practicing wisdom. I thought I might just share a little interesting reading from the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. That's a challenging Sanskrit word to say, Shvetashvatara. And this is very much an expression of bhakti. Let us know that highest great Lord of lords, the highest deity of deities, the master of masters. His high power is revealed as manifold, as inherent, acting as force and knowledge. There is no master of his in the world, no ruler of his, not even a sign of him. He is the cause, the Lord of the lords of the organs, and there is of him neither parent nor lord. He is the one God, hidden in all beings, all-pervading, the self within all beings, watching over all works, dwelling in all beings, the witness, the perceiver, the only one, free from qualities. The wise who perceive him dwelling within their self, to them belongs eternal happiness and serenity, not to others. He who knows this God as primal cause, through Sankhya and Yoga, achieves mukti, freedom, or moksha. The wise who perceive him dwelling within their self, to them belongs eternal happiness and serenity. The God of gods. We start with this relationship to our Ishta Devata, our chosen face of God, because we need to have a personal connection with something that we can sort of experience tangibly. But the God of gods is beyond that. It's beyond quality. It's behind our Ishta Devata. And so in the way that I'm suggesting our relationship, the teacher-student relationship, the student-teacher relationship, is a process that changes, that evolves over time. Our relationship to God changes over time as well. Our chosen face of God, our Ishta Devata, may change for us over the course of our lives. There's nothing wrong with that. We may have a relationship for years to Krishna as an embodiment of qualities that we aspire to cultivate in ourselves. And then at some point we discover there are qualities or characteristics of Christ or of Kali that we want to embody. But remember, the God of gods is behind Krishna and behind Kali. And the God of gods is in each of us, without quality. It is the no thing that is often spoken of in Buddhism. And so our relationship to our beloved changes. It's interesting, there's a anthropologist, Helen Fisher, who's studied love quite extensively. And it's interesting that this is an anthropologist, and she's often writing in psychological journals. She works with neuroscientists, and what she's discovered and sort of concluded about love is there isn't a single type of love. She breaks it down as lust, which gets us out there looking for a partner; romance, which helps us focus on one person; and then what she calls attachment, which sustains a relationship when the lust and the romance falls away. And that attachment, I would argue, is what we're talking about when we talk about devotion. Devotion to our beloved. Whether the lust or the romance are there or not, they kind of come and go. And they're much more emotional, those experiences of love, lust and romance. Not that they're not fun when they happen. And it's probably a great experience when all three are happening at the same time. But in Fisher's research, the neuroscience that's come out of this, each of these seems to operate in a different part of the brain, to light up a different part of the brain when they're present. So lust lights up a particular part of the brain, romance another part of the brain, and attachment, what she calls attachment, and what I suggest is devotion, lights up another part of the brain. Get all three of those going at the same time, and it's a pretty lit brain. We can cultivate devotion, and it doesn't have to be attachment in the way that we typically think of that term, possessiveness, right? And in fact, I would argue that those lucky relationships that really grow into maturity are not possessive at all. They are of a devotional type of love, a love that isn't possessive, that doesn't have ownership as a part of it. And that's what we can cultivate in our relationships with each other, with our loved ones, even with our companion animals. And it's the type of love we can absolutely cultivate. Not even different from that, but to be aware that we're also cultivating our love of our Ishta Devata, our chosen face of God, that's both out there and in here. That's both immanent and transcendent. Why don't we just end with a few minutes of reflecting on love and devotion. Just a quiet few minutes of perhaps again recalling a time that we were in love and that we felt that sense of being in love throughout our being, every cell of our being, every petal of our mind. Such that we were actually being love. And as you feel some of that now, as you recollect, as you remember, and as you experience that sensation of being love, if you choose, I invite you to radiate that feeling of love outward toward all beings. If you can radiate that love far into the corners of the universe, as far as you can go, toward all sentient beings, known and unknown to us. And see that love saturating and surrounding each and every cell of each and every sentient being throughout the universe. Filling them to overflowing with this love, this bhakti, this devotion. See it saturate each and every cell of their beings and each and every petal of their minds. All the beings, known and unknown to us. And returning now to your own center of being, attending to the breath, just noticing the breath flowing in or flowing out. Not trying to control it, not trying not to control it, but simply letting the breath breathe. And why don't we conclude with the Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti mantra. Om Shanti, Shanti. Shanti. Thank you for coming today and for sharing your energies in what, for many of us, has been a very difficult week and perhaps a very difficult time on a number of levels. And hopefully going forward we can continue to cultivate and work with our Bhakti Yoga practice. Shanti.